the dust-laden winds of Beaver. Udo carried the scent of trouble as Vanessa Vance stepped out of the stagecoach, her emerald eyes squinting against the harsh sunlight of 1875. She clutched a worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much after fleeing from Philadelphia, with little more than the clothes on her back, and a desperate hope for a new beginning. Beaver was supposed to be her fresh start, far away from the controlling grasp of her former employer, who had made her life unbearable with his unwanted advances. At 22, Vanessa had learned the hard way that beauty could be as much a curse as a blessing. Her chestnut hair fell in loose waves down her back, and despite the modesty of her travel-worn blue dress, she could feel eyes tracking her movements as she made her way toward the town's only boarding house. "You must be the new seamstress," a kindly older woman said as Vanessa approached the weathered two-story building with a hand-painted sign reading, "Mrs. Holloway's Boarding House." Vanessa nodded, grateful that her correspondence with the town's general store owner had secured her both lodging and employment before her arrival. "Yes, madam, Vanessa Vance. I believe Mr. Peterson is expecting me at his store tomorrow morning, Mrs." Holloway's eyes crinkled at the corners as she smiled. "Indeed he is. The whole town's been waiting for someone with proper tailoring skills. Come in, dear. You look dead on your feet." The boarding house was modest but clean, with faded floral wallpaper and sturdy oak furniture that had seen decades of use. Vanessa's room was small but private, a luxury she hadn't been able to afford in Philadelphia. After washing away the dust from her journey in a basin of cool water, she sat by the window, watching as the town settled into evening. Beaver was larger than she'd expected, with a main street lined with businesses that spoke of growing prosperity: a bank, general store, saloon, and even a small theater. Beyond the main buildings, houses dotted the landscape, and in the distance, the mountains stood sentinel against the darkening sky. "This can be my home," she whispered to herself, trying to believe it. The next morning, Vanessa reported to Peterson's general store, where she was shown to a small back room equipped with a sewing machine, bolts of fabric, and various notions. The work was familiar and comforting, and she soon found herself settling into a routine. During her first week, she met many of the townspeople as they came in for alterations or new clothing, and she found most to be welcoming, if a bit curious about the young woman who had arrived alone from the East. It was during her second week in Beaver that she first laid eyes on Lucas Cole. He strode into the store late one afternoon, sunlight glinting off his sandy blonde hair, his tall frame filling the doorway. Unlike many of the men in town who worked in the nearby silver mines or ran businesses, Lucas was a cattle rancher with a spread north of town. His sun-bronzed face spoke of days spent outdoors, but it was his eyes, a startling shade of blue, that caught and held Vanessa's attention. "Mr. Peterson said you might be able to mend these," he said, placing a pair of leather riding gloves on her workbench. His voice was deep but gentle, with a slight drawl that marked him as having come from somewhere farther south. Vanessa examined the worn gloves, noting the split seams. "Yes, I can repair these. They're fine quality. My father's," Lucas explained. "Had them since before I was born." Their fingers brushed as she handed them back after examining them, and she felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. "They'll be ready by Friday, Mr. Cole." "Lucas," he corrected with a smile that transformed his serious face. "Everyone calls me Lucas." From that day forward, Lucas found reasons to visit the general store frequently. Sometimes it was legitimate business supplies for his ranch, repairs needed for clothing or tack, but often he would linger, engaging Vanessa in conversation. She learned that he had inherited his ranch 5 years earlier after his father's death, that he employed 4 ranch hands who helped manage his growing herd of cattle, and that he had a reputation as one of the most fair-minded men in the territory. "You're not married?" she asked one day, then immediately blushed at her forwardness. Lucas chuckled. "No, Miss Vance, haven't found the right woman, or perhaps I've been too busy with the ranch to look properly." His eyes held hers a moment longer than necessary. "And you, no husband waiting back east?" Vanessa shook her head, focusing on her stitching. "No, no one waiting anywhere." As spring turned to summer, Vanessa found herself looking forward to Lucas's visits. They were never improper, always in the public space of the store, with Mr. Peterson or customers often nearby, but there was a growing warmth between them that made her heart flutter in a way she'd never experienced before. In July, Lucas invited her to attend Beaver's Independence Day celebration as his guest. The town gathered for a picnic in the central square, with music, dancing, and fireworks planned for the evening. Vanessa wore her best dress, a pale yellow creation she'd sewn herself, with lace trim at the collar and cuffs. "You look beautiful," Lucas said when he came to escort her from the boarding house. He offered his arm, and she placed her hand on it, feeling the solid strength beneath his blue cotton shirt. The celebration was joyful, with tables laden with food, children running and playing games, and couples dancing to the lively music of a small band. Lucas introduced Vanessa to neighbors and friends, his hand occasionally resting lightly on the small of her back, a proprietary gesture that sent warmth spreading through her. "I'm glad you came to Beaver," he told her as they watched the fireworks explode against the night sky, their shoulders touching as they sat on a blanket spread on the grass. "So am I," she replied, and meant it. The weeks that followed were the happiest Vanessa had known. Lucas courted her properly, taking her on drives in his wagon to show her the beauty of the Utah landscape, bringing her wildflowers he'd picked along the trail, and once, a small silver brooch in the shape of a rose that he'd commissioned from a silversmith in Salt Lake City. But even as happiness bloomed between them, a shadow fell across Vanessa's new life. Edgar Blackwell, the new owner of the Antler Saloon, had set his sights on her. A barrel-chested man with small, mean eyes and a reputation for rough treatment of the saloon girls, Blackwell began stopping by the general store, ostensibly to order new curtains or tablecloths for his establishment. "You should come work for me," he said during one such visit, leaning across her workbench. "I'd pay you double what Peterson gives you." "I'm quite happy where I am, thank you," Vanessa replied firmly, not looking up from her sewing. Blackwell's mouth tightened. "A pretty thing like you shouldn't be hidden away in a back room. You'd make a fortune tending bar. The miners would drink twice as much just to look at you." "That's enough, Blackwell," Mr. Peterson intervened, having overheard the exchange. "Miss Vance isn't interested." Blackwell straightened, his eyes cold. "Everyone has a price, Peterson, even your precious seamstress." He tipped his hat mockingly toward Vanessa. "Think about it, sweetheart. My offer stands." After he left, Mr. Peterson apologized. "That man's been nothing but trouble since he bought the Antler. I'm sorry he bothered you." Vanessa forced a smile. "It's all right. I've dealt with his kind before." But the encounter left her shaken, bringing back memories of Philadelphia and the reason for her flight west. She said nothing to Lucas about Blackwell's proposition, not wanting to worry him, but the saloon owner's interest didn't wane. He began appearing wherever she went at the general store, outside the boarding house, even at Sunday services, where his presence was a novelty that raised eyebrows throughout the congregation. One evening in late August, Lucas invited Vanessa to dinner at his ranch. He sent his foreman, Sam, to bring her in the ranch wagon, promising to show her the improvements he'd made to the main house. It was the first time she would see his home, and she spent extra time on her appearance, wearing a deep blue dress that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair. The Cole Ranch was impressive, a large two-story house built of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Corrals, barns, and bunkhouses were visible beyond the main building, all well maintained. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, with quality furniture, colorful rugs, and shelves lined with books. "My mother's influence," Lucas explained as he showed her through the main rooms. "She was determined that even in frontier country we would live with some civilization." They ate dinner on the porch, enjoying the cooling evening air and the spectacular sunset painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Lucas's cook, an elderly Chinese man named Ming who had been with the family for 20 years, served a meal that rivaled any Vanessa had eaten in Philadelphia's finest restaurants. "I want you to be comfortable here, Vanessa," Lucas said as they lingered over coffee and apple pie. His use of her given name still gave her a thrill. In public, he maintained the propriety of calling her Miss Vance. "I hope you'll visit often." The look in his eyes made her breath catch. There was longing there, but also respect, a combination she'd rarely seen in a man's gaze. "I'd like that," she replied softly. When it was time to return to town, Lucas himself drove her back, unwilling to delegate the task to one of his hands. The night was warm, stars crowding the vast Utah sky, and the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves lulled Vanessa into a peaceful state. Lucas stopped the wagon outside Mrs. Holloway's boarding house but made no immediate move to help her down. Instead, he turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Vanessa, I'm not a man who believes in wasting time once I'm certain of something." His voice was steady, though she could feel a slight tremor in his hands. "And I'm certain about you, about us. I know we haven't known each other long, but out here, life doesn't always give us the luxury of long courtships." Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. "What are you saying, Lucas?" "I'm saying I love you, and if you'll give me a little more time to prove myself worthy, I'd like to ask you to be my wife." Tears sprang to Vanessa's eyes. "You don't need more time. I love you too, Lucas. I have for weeks now." His smile was brilliant in the moonlight. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to turn away if she wished, but she met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged under the vast canopy of stars. When they pulled apart, Lucas pressed his forehead to hers. "I'll speak to Reverend Phillips tomorrow. We can announce our engagement on Sunday if that suits you." Vanessa nodded, too happy for words. Lucas helped her down from the wagon, stealing one more kiss before bidding her goodnight. She floated into the boarding house, her feet barely touching the floor. Mrs. Holloway was still up, knitting by lamplight in the parlor. "Well, look at you, glowing like you've swallowed the moon," she said with a knowing smile. "I take it Mr. Cole has finally spoken his mind." "He has," Vanessa confirmed, unable to stop smiling. "We're to be engaged." "About time," the older woman said approvingly. "That young man's been sweet on you since the day you arrived." Vanessa slept little that night, her mind filled with visions of a future with Lucas, a home, children, a life built together on the ranch she'd already begun to love. But her dreams were interrupted by a sharp knock on her door just after dawn. It was Sam, Lucas's foreman, his face grave beneath his weathered hat. "Miss Vance, Mr. Cole sent me. There's trouble at the south pasture rustlers hit during the night. He wants you to know he'll be delayed returning to town, maybe a day or two." Disappointment flooded through her, but Vanessa nodded understanding. "Please tell him to be careful, Sam, and thank you for coming to let me know." With Lucas away, Vanessa threw herself into her work, completing a backed-up order of shirts for the miners and beginning a special project embroidering handkerchiefs with Lucas's initials as a surprise engagement gift. She was so focused that she failed to notice Edgar Blackwell watching her through the store window, his eyes calculating. That evening, as she walked back to the boarding house after closing the shop, Blackwell stepped out from between two buildings, blocking her path. "Evening, Miss Vance." His breath reeked of whiskey, though he stood steadily enough. "Heard your cowboys gone chasing after rustlers." Vanessa's spine stiffened. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell. I need to get home." He moved closer, forcing her to step back. "I've been patient, darling, but my patience is running out. I want you working at the Antler, and I want more than that, too." "I'm engaged to be married," she said firmly. "To Lucas Cole. Now please step aside." Blackwell's face darkened. "Cole, that self-righteous son of a bitch. You could do better, sweetheart." "Better than the most respected rancher in the county? I think not." She tried to step around him, but he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You think you're too good for me, for my saloon." His voice was low, dangerous. "I own half this town now, and soon I'll own it all. Even Cole doesn't have the money or influence I do." Vanessa wrenched her arm free. "Money isn't everything, Mr. Blackwell. Now let me pass, or I'll scream loud enough to bring the whole town running." For a moment she thought he might force the issue, but a door opened down the street, spilling lamplight onto the boardwalk, and Blackwell stepped back. "This isn't over," he warned. "Not by a long shot. You'll learn that no one refuses Edgar Blackwell and gets away with it." He melted back into the shadows, leaving Vanessa shaking with fear and anger. She hurried the rest of the way to the boarding house, checking frequently over her shoulder. Once safely inside, she debated whether to tell Mrs. Holloway about the encounter, but decided against it. The older woman would only worry, and Vanessa didn't want to create a scandal before Lucas returned. The next day passed without incident, though Vanessa found herself jumping at every sound and watching the door anxiously. By closing time, there was still no word from Lucas, and her nerves were stretched thin with both worry for him and fear of another confrontation with Blackwell. Mr. Peterson, sensing her unease, insisted on walking her back to the boarding house. "Lucas would have my hide if I let anything happen to you," he said kindly. "And to be honest, I don't trust that Blackwell character as far as I could throw him." Vanessa accepted gratefully, but as they neared Mrs. Holloway's, the older man was hailed by the bank manager with an urgent question about an order. "Go on," Peterson told her. "We're almost there and it's still daylight. I'll just be a minute." Nodding, Vanessa continued the last 50 yards alone. She had just reached the picket fence surrounding the boarding house when a hand clamped over her mouth, and she was dragged backward into the narrow alley between the neighboring buildings. "Told you we weren't finished," Blackwell growled in her ear, his free arm like an iron band around her waist. Vanessa fought wildly, kicking and clawing, but Blackwell was much stronger. He dragged her further into the alley, away from the street and potential witnesses. "I offered you a good position," he hissed. "Respect, good money. But you had to play the high and mighty lady, didn't you? Too good for the likes of Edgar Blackwell." He spun her around, slamming her against the rough wooden wall of the building. Stars exploded in her vision as her head struck the boards. "Lucas will kill you for this," she managed to say, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip in the impact. Blackwell laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. "Cole's probably dead already. Those weren't ordinary rustlers hit his herd, they were men I paid to keep him occupied while I dealt with you." Horror washed through Vanessa at his words. "You're lying." "Am I? Guess we'll see." His hand shot out, grabbing her throat. "Now, you're going to come with me, nice and quiet. We're going to the Antler where we can have a private discussion about your future. And if you scream, I'll make sure Cole's ranch burns to the ground with all his men inside." Vanessa knew it was no idle threat. Blackwell's eyes held the cold detachment of a man who had killed before and would do so again without hesitation. but she wouldn't submit to him. "No," she said, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "I will never go with you, willingly or otherwise." Rage transformed his features. "You don't get to say no to me." His open hand struck her cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side. Pain exploded across her face, but Vanessa refused to cry out. When she looked back at him, her eyes blazed with defiance. "Is this how you treat all women who refuse you? With violence? You're pathetic." Blackwell roared with fury. He reached to his belt, uncoiling the bullwhip that hung there, a tool she'd seen him use to intimidate drunks at the saloon. "I'll teach you some respect, you uppity bitch." He raised the whip, and Vanessa closed her eyes, bracing for the pain. But instead of the expected lash, she heard a sharp crack followed by a strangled cry from Blackwell. Opening her eyes, she saw Lucas standing at the mouth of the alley, the end of Blackwell's whip wrapped tightly around his fist, his face a mask of cold fury. "She's already taken," Lucas said, his voice deadly quiet as he gave the whip a vicious yank, pulling Blackwell off balance. "And if you ever touch her again, they won't find enough pieces of you to bury." Blackwell recovered quickly, releasing the whip and reaching for the pistol at his hip. Before he could clear leather, Lucas was on him, driving him back against the opposite wall with a shoulder to the chest that knocked the wind from the saloon owner. What followed was brutal and swift. Lucas, for all his usual gentle demeanor, fought with the efficient violence of a man who had grown up in the unforgiving West. His fists connected with devastating precision jaw, solar plexus, ribs. Blackwell managed to land a few blows of his own, splitting Lucas's lip and opening a cut over his eye, but he was outmatched. When Blackwell finally slumped to the ground, semi-conscious and bloodied, Lucas turned to Vanessa. The rage drained from his face, replaced by concern as he saw the bruise forming on her cheek and the trickle of blood from her lip. "Vanessa." He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "Are you all right?" "Did he?" "No," she interrupted, understanding his unspoken question. "You got here in time, but how did you know?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "I didn't. I got back to town and went straight to the store, but Peterson said you'd already left. I was headed to the boarding house when I heard him threatening you." His thumbs brushed lightly over her cheekbones. "I should have been here sooner. I'm so sorry." "You couldn't have known," Vanessa said, leaning into his touch. "He claimed he sent those rustlers to keep you away." Lucas's eyes darkened. "That explains a lot. The rustlers seemed more interested in drawing us out than actually stealing cattle. We lost a good man chasing them." He glanced at Blackwell, who was starting to stir. "He'll answer for that too." By now, the commotion had drawn attention. Mr. Peterson and several other townspeople appeared at the alley entrance, expressions shifting from concern to understanding as they took in the scene. "Sheriff Bradley's down at the Simmons place," one man said. "I'll fetch him." Lucas nodded. "Tell him to bring extra deputies." "Blackwell's got some explaining to do about those rustlers, and I suspect we'll find more crimes to his name once we start looking." 2 men moved to secure Blackwell, who was now conscious but clearly in no shape to cause further trouble. Lucas turned his full attention back to Vanessa, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "Let's get you to the doctor," he said, his voice gentle but brooking no argument. "Doctor." Martin's examination confirmed what Vanessa already knew: bruises and minor cuts, but nothing broken or permanently damaged. He cleaned her wounds, applied a soothing salve to the bruise on her cheek, and prescribed rest. "She shouldn't be alone tonight," the doctor told Lucas as he packed up his supplies. "Concussion's unlikely, but better safe than sorry." Mrs. Holloway, who had arrived at the doctor's office in a flutter of concern, immediately spoke up. "She'll stay with me, of course. I'll keep an eye on her through the night." But Lucas shook his head. With all respect, Mrs. Holloway, I'd like Vanessa to come to the ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, can look after her, and I'll have my men standing guard. Blackwell may have accomplices. The older woman looked ready to object on grounds of propriety, but then nodded. That makes sense. But Mr. Cole, I trust you'll remember that you're not yet married. A faint smile touched Lucas's lips. Yes, madam. Vanessa's reputation is safe with me. An hour later, Vanessa found herself in the guest bedroom of Lucas's ranch house, changed into a nightgown borrowed from Mrs. Chen, with a cup of herbal tea that the Chinese woman insisted would help her sleep. Lucas had been true to his word, maintaining a respectful distance since their arrival at the ranch, though his eyes rarely left her. I'm staying in the room across the hall, he told her, standing in the doorway. If you need anything at all, just call out. Vanessa nodded, exhaustion suddenly washing over her. Thank you, Lucas. Not just for the room, but for— Don't thank me, he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. I should have been there sooner, should never have left town knowing what kind of man Blackwell was. You couldn't have known what he planned, Vanessa said. And you came when I needed you most. That's what matters. Lucas crossed the room then, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. When I saw him raise that whip, I've never felt such rage in my life. If you hadn't been there, I might have killed him with my bare hands. But you didn't, she reminded him. You stopped when he was down. That's the difference between you and men like him, Lucas. You have control, even in your anger. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I love you, Vanessa Vance, more than I thought possible, and I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again as long as I'm breathing. Tears welled in her eyes at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. I love you too, and I've never felt safer than I do right now with you. Lucas stood, clearly struggling with himself. I should let you rest. The doctor said sleep was important. Stay, Vanessa said impulsively, then blushed. Just until I fall asleep, please. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll sit right here, he said, indicating a chair near the bed. True to his word, Lucas remained in the chair as Vanessa settled under the quilt. His presence was comforting, a shield against the lingering fear from her encounter with Blackwell. Despite the day's trauma, or perhaps because of the emotional exhaustion it had caused, she fell asleep quickly. Her last sight, Lucas's steady gaze watching over her. She woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't recognize, momentarily disoriented until memories of the previous day flooded back. The soreness in her body confirmed it hadn't been a nightmare. Her cheek throbbed, and her back ached where she'd been slammed against the wall. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Chen's entrance with a breakfast tray. The small, energetic woman with iron-gray hair had a motherly manner that put Vanessa instantly at ease. Mr. Cole say you eat, then rest more, she said, placing the tray on a small table near the window. He ride to town early, talk to sheriff, come back soon. Vanessa was surprised to feel disappointment at Lucas's absence, though she understood the necessity. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. This looks wonderful. After breakfast and a bath in the copper tub that Mrs. Chen had arranged to have brought to her room, Vanessa felt much improved. She dressed in the clean clothes that Lucas had sent someone to fetch from her room at the boarding house, grateful that he'd thought of such practical details. She was sitting on the porch, enjoying the warmth of the late summer sun, when Lucas returned shortly after midday. He dismounted with fluid grace, handing the reins to a waiting ranch hand, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. You look better, he said, climbing the steps to join her. He was freshly shaved, though she could see the darkening bruise along his jaw where Blackwell had landed a punch. I feel better, she confirmed. What news from town? Lucas settled into the chair beside her. Sheriff Bradley's holding Blackwell on charges of assault and conspiracy to commit theft. 3 of his men at the saloon confessed that he paid the rustlers to create a diversion. There may be more charges coming. Seems Blackwell's been running a protection racket in the mining camps north of town. Will he go to prison? Lucas nodded. Almost certainly, and even if he somehow avoids that, he won't be welcome in Beaver again. The town council's already voted to revoke his business license. Relief washed over Vanessa. So it's over. It is. Lucas reached for her hand. There's something else. I spoke with Reverend Phillips this morning. He's agreed to marry us whenever we're ready. Vanessa's heart leapt. How soon can we be ready? Lucas chuckled at her eagerness. As soon as you like, Mrs. Chen is already planning a wedding feast that will feed half the county. 2 weeks, Vanessa decided. Time enough for me to finish my dress and for the bruises to fade. 2 weeks, Lucas agreed, lifting her hand to brush his lips across her knuckles. I can wait that long. Barely. The next fortnight passed in a whirlwind of activity. While Lucas managed his ranch and dealt with the aftermath of the rustling attempt, Vanessa split her time between her work at the general store and preparations for the wedding. Word spread quickly through Beaver and the surrounding area, and gifts began arriving: daily hand-crafted furniture, homemade preserves, quilts, and other practical items to start their life together. Mrs. Holloway hosted a small gathering of women to help Vanessa put together a proper trousseau, many contributing linens and other household goods that the young bride-to-be, with her limited possessions, lacked. The gesture touched Vanessa deeply, confirming that she had found not just a husband in Beaver, but a community, a home. Her wedding dress was her masterpiece, sewn in stolen moments when the store was quiet. Made of ivory satin with lace overlay on the bodice and sleeves, it was simple yet elegant, reflecting both her skill and her practical nature. The night before the wedding, she showed it to Mrs. Holloway, seeking the older woman's approval. It's beautiful, my dear Mrs. Holloway said, tears in her eyes. Lucas won't be able to take his eyes off you. I wish my parents could see it, Vanessa admitted softly. Both had died when she was 16, leaving her to make her own way in the world. They would have loved Lucas. Mrs. Holloway squeezed her hand. They're watching over you, I've no doubt, and they'd be so proud of the woman you've become. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the coming fall. The ceremony was held in Beaver's small church, which was filled to capacity with townsfolk and ranchers from the surrounding area. Lucas stood at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving Vanessa as she walked down the aisle on Mr. Peterson's arm. Reverend Phillips conducted a simple but moving service, and when Lucas and Vanessa exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. The kiss they shared after being pronounced husband and wife was brief but tender, a promise of all that was to come. The celebration afterward was held at the coal ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard under the spreading branches of old cottonwood trees. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, preparing a feast that blended traditional American fare with Chinese dishes that had become favorites of Lucas and his ranch hands. There was music and dancing well into the evening, with Vanessa's first dance as a married woman naturally reserved for her new husband. Happy, Mrs. Cole? Lucas asked as they swayed together, his arm firm around her waist. Vanessa looked up at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Happier than I ever dreamed possible. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a golden glow over the continuing celebration. Eventually, Lucas leaned down to whisper in Vanessa's ear. Ready to slip away, she nodded, suddenly both nervous and eager for what lay ahead. They made their goodbyes, enduring good-natured teasing from Lucas's ranch hands and motherly advice from Mrs. Holloway, before retreating to the main house. Lucas surprised her by sweeping her into his arms at the threshold. Tradition, he explained with a grin as he carried her inside and up the stairs to the master bedroom. The room had been transformed in Vanessa's absence that day. Fresh flowers filled vases on every surface, their scent mingling with the clean pine smell from the newly laid fire in the small hearth. The large four-poster bed was turned down, the sheets crisp and white against the rich colors of a wedding quilt that Vanessa recognized as the work of several local women. Lucas set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "I had Mrs. Chen prepare a bath if you'd like," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I thought you might want time." Vanessa appreciated his thoughtfulness, his understanding that this step, for all its rightness, was still momentous. "Thank you, I won't be long." The adjoining dressing room did indeed contain a copper tub filled with steaming, fragrant water. Vanessa took her time, washing away the dust from the day's festivities, and donning the delicate nightgown that had been part of Mrs. Holloway's wedding gift. When she returned to the bedroom, Lucas had removed his jacket and tie and was standing by the window, gazing out at the starlit landscape. He turned at her entrance, his breath catching audibly. "You're so beautiful," he said, crossing to her. "Sometimes I can't believe you're real." "That you're mine." "I am," Vanessa assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "Yours, always." His kiss was different from those they had shared before, deeper, hungrier, with nothing held back. Vanessa responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed herself against the solid warmth of his body. Any lingering nervousness melted away under the heat of his touch, replaced by a longing that matched his own. "I love you, Vanessa Cole," Lucas murmured against her lips, the use of her new name sending a thrill through her. "With everything I am." "Show me," she whispered, and he did. The days and weeks that followed were the happiest of Vanessa's life. She settled into her role as mistress of the Cole Ranch with surprising ease, taking over the household management from Mrs. Chen, though the Chinese woman maintained firm control of the kitchen and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Though she continued to sew, creating clothing for Lucas and herself, and occasionally taking special commissions from town, she no longer needed to work at the general store. Lucas proved to be a considerate, loving husband who valued her opinions and included her in decisions about the ranch. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their day, or read to each other by the fire when the weather turned cold. And at night, they discovered in each other a passion that seemed to grow rather than diminish with time. As fall gave way to winter, Vanessa began to suspect what the increasing tiredness and morning queasiness might mean. She confirmed her suspicions with Dr. Martin during a trip to town, and that evening, she shared the news with Lucas. "A baby," he repeated, his expression one of wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Vanessa covered his hand with her own. "Due in early summer, the doctor thinks. Are you happy, Lucas?" His answer was to pull her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the joy words couldn't express. "I never thought I could love anyone the way I love you," he said when they finally parted, "but I was wrong. My heart just keeps expanding." The winter of 1875-76 was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes isolated the ranch for days at a time. But inside the sturdy house, warmth and love abounded. Lucas fussed over Vanessa's health, making sure she had the best food available and plenty of rest. Mrs. Chen prepared special tonics that she claimed would ensure a strong, healthy baby. And though Vanessa was skeptical of some of the ingredients, she drank them dutifully, touched by the older woman's care. By spring, Vanessa's condition was obvious, her belly rounded beneath the loose dresses she had altered to accommodate her changing figure. Lucas took immense pride in her pregnancy, his hand often finding its way to her stomach, to feel the baby's increasingly vigorous movements. They spent hours discussing names and planning for the future, with Lucas insisting on converting a small room adjoining their bedroom into a nursery. News from town confirmed that Edgar Blackwell had been convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. The Antler Saloon had been purchased by a businessman from Salt Lake City who hired a respectable manager to run it, improving both its reputation and its contribution to the community. On a warm June evening, with summer in full bloom across the ranch, Vanessa's labor began. Mrs. Chen summoned the midwife who had been alerted weeks in advance to expect the call, and Lucas, though banished from the birthing room, paced the hallway outside, his face etched with concern each time Vanessa's cries penetrated the thick wooden door. After 6 hours, a remarkably short labor for a first child, according to the midwife, Liam Cole entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to his mother's eyes. When Lucas was finally allowed into the room, his hands trembled as he took his son, wrapped in a soft blanket Vanessa had embroidered with the Cole family crest. "He has your eyes," Vanessa said tiredly, watching as Lucas cradled their child with a mixture of awe and terror. "And your stubborn chin," Lucas replied, his voice thick with emotion. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, arranging himself so that Vanessa could lean against him, the three of them connected in a circle of love. "Welcome to the world, Liam Cole," Lucas whispered to his son. "You've got the best mother in all of Utah Territory." Vanessa smiled up at her husband. "And the best father any child could ask for." In the years that followed, the Cole Ranch prospered, as did the family that called it home. Liam grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Laura, whose arrival was considerably more dramatic, coming during a spring thunderstorm that had temporarily washed out the road to town, forcing Lucas to deliver his daughter himself with guidance from Mrs. Chen. Vanessa's skills as a seamstress remained in high demand, though she now chose to work only on special projects that interested her: wedding dresses for local brides, christening gowns, and the occasional suit for Lucas when he needed to impress Eastern investors or railroad executives. Her reputation spread throughout the territory, and she even received commissions from as far away as San Francisco, though she politely declined most long-distance requests, preferring to focus on her family and community. Lucas expanded the ranch operations, investing in better breeding stock and implementing new farming techniques that increased productivity. By 1880, the Cole Ranch was one of the largest and most successful in southern Utah, employing dozens of men and supporting several families who lived on the property year-round. The couple became pillars of the beaver community, contributing to the building of a larger school and a proper hospital. Vanessa organized a women's aid society that helped newly arrived families get established, remembering her own uncertain beginnings in the town. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Vanessa with a trip to San Francisco, her first journey away from Beaver since her arrival. They left the children in the capable care of Mrs. Chen and Sam, now the ranch foreman and married to a local schoolteacher, and spent 2 glorious weeks exploring the bustling city, attending the theater, and shopping for luxuries not available in their small town. "Would you ever want to live somewhere like this?" Lucas asked as they strolled along the bustling waterfront on their last day, watching ships from around the world unload exotic cargo. Vanessa considered the question seriously, looking out at the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, then back at the crowded streets behind them. "It's exciting," she admitted, "and beautiful in its way. But no, I wouldn't want to live here. Beaver is home." Lucas squeezed her hand. "I was hoping you'd say that." Upon their return, life resumed its pleasant rhythm. As the children grew, they became increasingly involved in the daily operations of the ranch, Liam showing an early aptitude for working with the horses, while Laura displayed her mother's talent with needle and thread, as well as a surprising head for figures that made her father predict she would one day run the business side of the ranch. In the spring of 1882, their family was completed with the birth of twins, a boy and girl they named William and Vivian. The double blessing, coming when Vanessa was 30, was unexpected but joyfully received. The older children, now 6 and 4, were fascinated by the babies, with Liam solemnly promising to teach his little brother to ride as soon as he was big enough, and Laura insisting on helping her mother with every aspect of their care. On a warm evening the following summer, Vanessa sat on the porch, the sleeping twins in a cradle beside her, watching as Lucas taught Liam how to throw a lasso in the yard. Laura sat at Vanessa's feet, carefully stitching a doll's dress with the patient concentration she had inherited from her mother. "Mama," Laura said without looking up from her work, "tell me again how you and Papa met." Vanessa smiled, having told the story many times already, though always in a version appropriate for young ears. "I was working at Mr. Peterson's store sewing, and your father brought in a pair of gloves that needed mending." "Grandpa's gloves," Laura supplied, familiar with this part of the tale. "The ones Papa keeps in his desk." "That's right, and he was so handsome that I could hardly thread my needle," Laura giggled. "And Papa says you were so pretty he kept finding things that needed fixing just so he could see you again." "He did indeed," Vanessa confirmed, smiling at the memory of those early days. "Your father was very persistent." "And then the bad man tried to hurt you, and Papa saved you," Laura continued, reciting the sanitized version of events that had become family lore. Vanessa watched as Lucas demonstrated the proper wrist motion for the lasso, his movements still as fluid and strong as they had been when she first met him. "Yes, he did. Your father is a hero." Lucas looked up then, as if sensing her gaze, and the smile he gave her still had the power to make her heart beat faster. He said something to Liam, tousled the boy's hair, and then crossed the yard to join them on the porch. "What are my favorite ladies discussing?" he asked, dropping a kiss on top of Laura's head before sitting beside Vanessa and taking her free hand in his. "Mama was telling me how you met," Laura informed him. "The part where you saved her from the bad man." Lucas's eyes met Vanessa's over their daughter's head, his expression softening with memories both painful and precious. "It wasn't quite like that, Butterfly. Your mama was pretty brave all on her own." "But you caught the whip," Laura insisted, having heard this detail from Sam, who told a slightly more dramatic version than her parents. "And you said she's already taken." Lucas chuckled. "Well, that part's true enough. I did say that. And you meant it," Vanessa added quietly. Lucas lifted her hand to his lips. "With all my heart, then and now." Laura, satisfied that the romantic part of the story had been properly acknowledged, returned to her sewing. Lucas slipped his arm around Vanessa's shoulders, drawing her closer against his side as they watched their son continue his practice with the lasso, his small face screwed up in concentration. "Happy?" Lucas asked softly, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding day and countless times since. Vanessa leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her as she surveyed the life they had built together, the home filled with love, the beautiful children, the man beside her who had kept every promise he ever made to her. "Completely," she answered, and knew it would always be true. In the distance, the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and sage across the yard, mingling with the sweet smell of the roses Vanessa had planted along the porch. From the bunkhouse, someone had started playing a guitar, the music soft and melodic in the gathering twilight. Lucas pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Vanessa Cole, more every day." "And I love you," she replied, "for saving me in more ways than you'll ever know." They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness slowly claimed the land, the stars appearing one by one in the vast Utah sky. Their children living proof of the love that had begun with a pair of worn gloves and a whip caught in mid-air were all around them. Liam now sprawled on the grass studying the emerging constellations. Laura curled at their feet with her sewing, the twins sleeping peacefully nearby. It was, Vanessa thought, everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream. A true home, a real family, and a love that had not just survived challenges but grown stronger because of them. The cruel Philadelphia employer who had driven her west, Edgar Blackwell, who had threatened all she held dear, these were now just shadows from the past, unable to touch the brightness of her present or the promise of her future. As if reading her thoughts, Lucas tightened his arm around her shoulders. "No regrets?" he asked. Vanessa turned her face up to his, seeing in his eyes the same devotion that had been there from the beginning. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step I took led me here to you, to us. How could I regret any of it?" His smile was tender as he bent to claim her lips in a kiss that, even after all these years, still held the power to make her feel like that young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach into a new life, uncertain but hopeful, vulnerable but brave. When they parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers for a moment, their breath mingling in the cool evening air. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vanessa Cole," he whispered. "The absolute best thing." And as the stars continued to emerge above the ranch that was their kingdom, Vanessa knew with unshakable certainty that whatever the future held, whatever joys or sorrows, triumphs or challenges awaited them, they would face it together. Just as they had faced everything since that fateful day when a cowboy caught a whip and claimed a heart that was already his.